Very good morning, student. Hi, all of you. Me, myself, Mrs. Sheetal Shidani. Today I have class for Standard 11th Arts, subject Psychology. In this presentation, we will discuss about the explanation of lesson number 2, study method. In this, my 6th lecture will go for the lesson number 2. Okay, my dear student. As per your textual material, I've been shared some of the clips so that you can understand the sum of the topic. First, if we understand the chapter title, then only we can understand what actually the study method means. Study method in this chapter, we will study how we can approach the psychology as the methodological way. It is considered as a science. Psychology is a science. If we understand the methodological study and when we recognize as a science of behavior in the form of psychology, मेथड अगर हमें पता चलेगा स्टडी के बारे में कि वो लॉजिकली थ्योरी पैटर्न है इसमें साइकोलॉजी में, तभी हम समझ पाएंगे कि स्टडी मेथोडोलॉजी इज मेक द साइकोलॉजी इज अ साइंस. I hope my student understand the introduction. For any subject to be considered as a science, it is important to know the scientific in the source and thought which the information about the subject matter it is derived. It would determine that the scientific subject matters in order to prove that subject is scientific. Two important aspects have to be kept in the mind. What is it studying? How is it studying? And its studying method. हम क्या पढ़ रहे हैं और हम कैसे पढ़ रहे हैं, तो हमें उसके बारे में पूरी जानकारी होनी चाहिए. If we ask the logically that why we study the psychology, why the subject comes and why we are studying, then we realize the actual meaning that comes in the mind and we think that is the methodological study. So study methods have the subject matter and there are the 6 main methods which has been introduced, which are as follows. Method of observation, longitudinal, cross-sectional, case history methods, experimental method, questionnaire method, and interview method, psychological test. In this method of observation, what you understand, आप क्या देखते हो और आप क्या सीखते हो देखने से, that means pursuing learning. Okay, देख के पढ़ाई करते हैं हम कई बार, जैसे कि most simple way of gathering information in the form of observation you do, and you see how you pursue and you get an introspect and certain things you learn from while your own eyes what you see. Understand? So where does the method comes in it? In the form of practical learning, that where you observe. आप कब ऑब्जर्व करोगे? आप कहीं पर कहीं जगह पे जाते हो, बहुत सारी चीजें आपको देखने को मिलती है और उसमें से आप सीखते हो. Okay, in a simple word like seeing can be very important, and certain factors are determining behind every person's observation, like what is it the aim, what the kind of approach has been adopted, and उसने क्या देखा, उसको क्या सीखने को मिला, and that comes in the mind and they started living in that manner. So observation is very much important for every people, and every people have been evaluated their personality. So in the professional way, many people have their own observation and they live their life, and that comes to know that how the efforts the peoples are having to have in the form of learning attitude in their mind, their present mind. Okay, so here are the some of the definition. Observation is a study of natural phenomena. It is a context, it is a causative factors. वो नेचुरल है, जैसे कि आप कहीं पे भी जाओगे तो आपके दिमाग में अचानक आ जाएगा, उसके बारे में आपको कहीं पे बुक में पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है. Observation is to be study conducted by the eyes of a natural phenomena in the causal matter that is given by the junk definition. So Based on the above definition, we have been come to know some of the point we have been clarified. Means we have been conclude some of the points from that definition. Observation is a study of natural phenomena. Observation means a study through the sense of organ, which reference of causative factor. Observation is the scientific study which is carried out with a specific aim in a specific order. Now let us try to understand the various types of observation method. Before I go for observation method, I again like to explain this three of the points before I have read. Okay. Natural phenomena means natural process. Observation means to study through the sense organ. आपको आपकी जैसे ही देखते हो आपके आपका रिएक्शन तुरंत उसको देखने के बाद हो जाता है। जैसे कि हम एक्सीडेंट देखते तो हम वैसा रिएक्ट करते हैं और हम ऐसा रिएक्शन हमारे देखने के बाद हो जाता है एंड दैट वी have effect in the form of how we observe and we express in that matter. Okay. Observation is the scientific study which is carried with a specific aim and specific order. That should be specified. जैसे कि आपका दिमाग जितना सोचेगा उतना ही वर्कआउट करेंगे. That should be very specified and very brief. Okay. सबका देखने का नजरिया एक जैसा नहीं होता. Everybody has their own limitation to see. जैसे कि हम पिन को देखते हैं तो हमको पिन के देखने के बाद हमें बहुत सारी चीजें उसमें से सीखनी होती है कि छोटी चीज है लेकिन बहुत काम की है. So it depends upon the people's how they think. Understand? So उसमें specified aim होता है and that we have to evaluate. और वहां तक वो specified order होते हैं. That means they have strategy to understand that form, the flow. Okay. Now types of observational method. इंट्रोस्पेक्शन यानी अपने अंदर यानी कि इंटरनली यू अंडरस्टैंड योरसेल्फ. नेचुरल ऑब्जर्वेशन मेथड व्हिच यू लर्न फ्रॉम नेचुरली without any kind of the practical knowledge you get from the nature. Means you get everything which not in the school but not from your family, but you learn naturally with yourself only. Okay. Systematic observation method, which is the form of systematic which has the law and orders, which is the very important and very logical. Field observation method means you learn some of the things where you move one place to another on the spot you come to know and you realize. Okay. Like ants are moving in a line, that means a field observation. You have been not going to see the ant, but it has been came on the way that ants are moving in the line, whether they are animal, and you've learned that animals can live together very calmly, very smoothly, very monotonously. Why not people? Okay, so fields observation make you to learn many things. Participatory observation means many times we groupism and we participate and we observe some of the things which has been inputted in our life. Comparative observation means if you compare yourself with others and you started to change your life and you change your mind, and that is called comparative observation. Okay, now I'm going from your textual explanation. Before I start the explanation of text, I want you to understand theory first, the basic points. Introspection method means Wilhelm's Woundhead and Edward Tichenor can be considered to be the scientific contributors towards the structuralism at this time. At that time, and structuralisms were most focused on the study of consciousness, and it was their subject matter. So, consciousness comprised of one sensation, feeling, experience, and image. So, where we comes to introspection, हम कब अपने आप में देखने लगते हैं. जैसे कि हम सेंसिबल है, सेंस हमारे सेंस कैसे होते हैं कि हम सेंसिटिव होते हैं, फील होता है, हम एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, हम इमेजिन करने लगते हैं, सोचने लगते हैं. जैसे कि ज़्यादा बारिश आती है तो हम सोचने लगते हैं कि इतनी बारिश है अभी ज़्यादा आएगी तो हम सोचेंगे कि रहने कितना प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगा. सो some of the sensible things we start thinking for the poor people, and that we think in our mind and we started thinking over that topic. Okay, so for this study the consciousness process, the method which was mainly used in the structuralism was introspect and introspect. ओके, तो आप वो स्ट्रक्चर बनाते हो, वो सोच डालते हो, फिर उसमें बारे में सोचोगे और फिर सोचते ही रहोगे. And that introspective methods to look within and observe one's own mental process is known as introspection. आप अपनी सोच में गिरते ही जाते हो और गिरते ही जाते हो. Understand, my dear student? In this method of introspection, within this try to describe a particular incident and phenomena, and in this process express the sensation, feeling, experience, and his mental process. This method may be apparently seen very easily, but it is difficult method. How it is difficult? In which the reason is the person has to properly focus on the incident and then only they can come to know. अगर उसका फोकस नहीं होगा तो इंट्रोस्पेक्शन नहीं कर पाएंगे. So intensely the feeling experience would be there in the individual person. अगर वो फील नहीं करेगा तो उसको समझ में नहीं आएगा कि इंट्रोस्पेक्शन क्या है. Understand? So every people need to understand yourself. अगर आप अपने आप को नहीं पूछोगे कि मैंने आज क्यों लिया है, तो आपको आपके बारे में पता होना चाहिए. तो everybody cannot easily use to introspect method, but for this the specific type of training is required. So which type of training in which many advantages are there? इंट्रोस्पेक्शन में एडवांटेज है और डिसएडवांटेज भी है. एडवांटेज में क्या है? इसमें टूल्स मेथड देयरफॉर इट इज सिंपल एंड इजी परफॉर्म. आप इंट्रोस्पेक्शन में इजीली आप अपने थॉट्स को डेवलप कर सकते हैं. इसमें कोई लेबोरेटरी नहीं है, नो इन्वेस्टमेंट. इसके एक लिमिटेशन क्या है? द मेथड कैनॉट यूज्ड ऑन एनिमल, चिल्ड्रन, इलिटरेट पीपल एंड मेंटल पेशेंट्स. ये बहुत सारे लोग पे हम यूज़ नहीं कर सकते. उसके बारे में उसको सोचने के लिए हम मजबूर नहीं कर सकते. उसको बताएंगे तो भी उसको कुछ पता नहीं चलेगा. उसके लिए एक कुछ काम का नहीं है, मतलब कि एक्सपेरिमेंट अपने आप को जानने का. So as a method is the subjective and generalizations and based on the no not possible. अगर हम देखें तो ये जनरलाइज है, लोगों के लिए नहीं है, सबके लिए है. That means method that is no specification is done. So it is very much problematic. अगर किसी को हम सोचने के लिए बोलेंगे वो कहाँ तक सोचने लगे, लेकिन हमें उसको बताना पड़ेगा कि ये सिर्फ एक्सपेरिमेंटल है, तो आप अपने आप को जान सकेंगे. तो उसमें एक लिमिटेशंस नहीं है. अंडरस्टैंड? इन दिस मैटर देयर इज अ नो स्कोप फॉर रिपीटेशन. यानी कि कई बार रिपीटेशन भी हो जाता है. कई बार हम अच्छी मेमोरीज होती है हम बार बार याद करते हैं. उसका मतलब ये नहीं कि हम एक की बात सोच रहे. दैट मीन्स दैट मेमोरी हैज बीन स्टोर्ड एंड दैट मेक our mind fresh, so that's why we are remembering. Understand? So introspection what make us mind conscious and study and unconscious mind. It's not unconscious, that is a conscious. And in this conscious state you started evaluating your thoughts, you like to understand yourself. So that is the form of limitation. Means in the form of method you are only conscious mind can be studied, not unconscious. अगर आपके दिल में आपके जैसे कि अनकॉन्शियस स्टेट में बहुत सारी चीज़ होती है. जैसे हम वर्क करते हैं, जैसे पीपल कोई भी काम करते तो 90% अनकॉन्शियस होता है, लेकिन 10% ही कॉन्शियस होता है. तो सब चीज़ें हमारी किसके पास होती है? अनकॉन्शियस माइंड के पास. लेकिन वो सारी चीज़ें हम नहीं जान पाते बाय डूइंग इंट्रोस्पेक्शन, अपने आप को जानने के लिए. Okay, my dear student, I hope you understand introspection. Now we are coming to the natural observation method. In natural observation method, no control are exercised and human behavior is studied in the natural environment. Therefore, this method is called uncontrolled. Means जैसे कि आप कुछ भी चीज देखते हो और उसमें कूद पड़ते हो और आपको अच्छी लगती है, एंड दैट डिस्क्राइब इन द फॉर्म ऑफ नेचर. अंडरस्टैंड? जैसे कि आप शॉपिंग के लिए जाते हो लेकिन आपको शॉपिंग नहीं करनी है, लेकिन आपको अच्छा लगा, फिर आप शॉपिंग को फोर्सफुली आप लोग को करना पड़ता है क्योंकि आप नेचुरली आप उसमें ऑब्जर्वेशन इतना किया है कि आपको अच्छा लगने लगा. एंड दिस ऑब्जर्वेशन दैट क्रिएट्स टू मेक यू टू डू अ शॉपिंग. अंडरस्टैंड? Here the observer without taking help or any tools to observe animals, human and group behavior with the reference to the specific incident. जैसे कि हम कोई भी चीज़ ऐसी कुछ नई देख लेते हैं, रास्ते में जाते कोई एनिमल का ऐसा रिएक्शन, दो एनिमल झगड़ रहे हैं या फिर दो कुत्ते भौंक रहे हैं, हमारा अटेंशन तुरंत जाएगा. एंड दैट हेल्प्स in the form of observing the method, and that comes in our mind, and we started to seeing and visualizing that thing, and that observation, that is form of natural. We stop. जैसे कुत्ता बाजू हमारे नजदीक आके भौंकेगा तो हम क्या करेंगे, हम दूर जाएंगे ना. Then why? Because we observe and the form of the natural method in the form of observing it, and we also react in the form of the behavior practices. So natural observation is also equally important. जैसे कि पेड़ होता है कि बारिश आने के बाद हरा घना हो जाता है, लेकिन हम उसके बारे में सोचते नहीं कि फील फ्रेश, दैट ऑल्सो गिव द मैसेज. तो हमें भी अपने लाइफ को हर सुबह फील फ्रेश करके अपने नए दिन की शुरुआत करनी चाहिए. सो नेचुरल ऑब्जर्वेशन टीचेस अस लॉट्स ऑफ थिंग्स. A study, there are many examples, whether I've been said lots of examples, but there are many examples in your book also, so I'm giving some of them. A study on a villagers whose village has been attacked by terrorists. A study of student behavior in their classroom between two bells. Okay, so एक बच्चे ने विलेजेस में अटैक किया था, जो टेररिस्ट का अटैक हुआ था, उस विलेज के बारे में उसने स्टडी किया था. एक बच्चे ने बिहेवियर स्टडी किया था, द क्लासरूम बिटवीन टू बेल्स, कि क्लासरूम दो बेल के बीच में है. तो इसमें इस एडवांटेज क्या है कि इसमें एक्सपीरियंस होगा, आप फील कर पाओगे, फिर आपको लर्निंग आएगी. लेकिन इसमें लिमिटेशन भी है, बहुत गलत चीज़ भी आपको रिपीट होगा, बहुत बुरी चीज़ भी आपके माइंड में आ सकती है. इसमें कोई कंट्रोल नहीं होता है. कई बार हम देखते ऑब्जर्व करते लेकिन हम कुछ रिएक्शन नहीं करते. Understand? So, without being aware, they are observing the subject matter, and that creates the form of the incident, but at the same time, he is able to pay attention to the only incident, and that creates the choice, and that is the subjectivity which he is unaware. उसको पता नहीं होता, फिर भी उसको डाला जाता है, तो which was naturally involved. जैसे कि किसी का झगड़ा होता है तो रास्ते हम जाते हैं, लेकिन हमको वो देखना पड़ता है, and you start reacting and your attitude start thinking about the negativity. Okay, so your reaction comes forcefully, that comes in your mind. Okay, my dear student. Now we are moving to next slide. Systematic observation method, in which limitation the natural experiment is the observation at one given time can pay attention to the only incident, gather information about the same in order to make observation more reliable. In this natural observation situation, that observation have gradually started using technical instrument, and one way screen, tape recorder, camera, video camera, etc. So systematic observation in which we have been done the smooth way, and in which that should be a very simplest way. So it is very effective and very much good. So observation will be not be able to get most minute details of all of them. अगर हम मूवी देखेंगे तो हम मूवी के कैरेक्टर जो देखेंगे तो मूवी में जैसे डिस्क्राइब किए हैं वैसे, क्योंकि वहाँ पे कैमरा में वैसा सेट बनाया है वैसे, लेकिन हम ह्यूमन कैरेक्टर्स के बारे में नहीं समझ पाएंगे, अंडरस्टैंड एक्चुअली उसकी लाइफ में क्या हो रहा है. सो some of the advantages, it gives the entertainment, it helps us to change your mood, and it's more reliable method, that is the natural observation method means. बट इन द फॉर्म सिस्टमेटिक मेथड विच हेल्प्स, जैसे कि मैं अभी आपको वीडियो से पढ़ा रही हूँ, लेकिन मुझे नहीं पता कि सभी क्वेश्चंस के एग्जाम्पल्स आपको सही में समझ आ रहे हैं, लेकिन दिस सिस्टम हेल्प अस टू मेक यू टू अंडरस्टैंड एज मच एज आई कैन ट्राई. ओके, बट somehow it is an advantage for the student, but sometimes it might be the limitation in the form of the suddenly the accidental cannot be studied by the method. जैसे कि कुछ ऐसी बात है कि जैसे कि आपकी क्वेरी है तो मैं समझ नहीं पाएंगी, लेकिन accidentally with the come some of the arise in the form of uncertainty that we can't solve in the form of, जैसे कि स्मूथली जो कुछ हो रहा है तो हम उसको स्टॉप करके कुछ बदल नहीं सकते. जैसे मूवी बन गई है लेकिन उसमें क्रॉप करके कुछ बना नहीं सकते, उसमें कुछ गलत है लेकिन वो मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगा तो मैं बना नहीं सकती. दैट शुड बी इन द सीक्वेंस फॉर्म इन द सिस्टम. तो सिस्टम को बदलाना बहुत प्रॉब्लमेटिक होता है, सिस्टम को बदल नहीं सकते, अंडरस्टैंड, इट इज अनचेंजेबल. ओके माय डियर स्टूडेंट, नाउ वी आर कमिंग टू फील्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन मेथड. फील्ड यानी कि आप बाहर जाते हो, घूमने जाते हो, और या फिर प्लेस वेयर द एक्चुअल इंसिडेंट हैज टेकन प्लेस एंड कंडक्ट हिज स्टडी, एंड देयरफॉर दिस नोन एज फील्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन. बहुत सारे हम फील्ड स्टडी स्कूल में भी पढ़ते हैं, इंजीनियर बच्चों को भी पढ़ाई जाती है, लेकिन यहाँ पे फील्ड स्टडी क्या होती है कि आप अपने आप सीखते हो. गुजरात में बहुत सारे गांव ऐसे हैं, उसमें एनवायरमेंटल, वुमेन प्रोग्रेस, बहुत सारी चीज़ें मैसेज में फील्ड स्टडी में बताई जाती है, और वो एक मैसेज देता है, जैसे कि वुमेन आर डूइंग द अमूल डेयरी इंडस्ट्री, एनिमल हस्बेंड्री, एंड देयर मेनी आर द बिकम द रोल मॉडल इन द फॉर्म ऑफ फील्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन. ओके, तो बहुत सारे हम फील्ड ऑब्जर्वेशन करते हैं. स्कूल हम प्लांट में देखने के लिए ले जाते हैं, तो वो सारे फील्ड विजिट हम करते हैं, लेकिन हम कुछ लर्निंग भी उसमें से लेते भी है, प्रैक्टिकल लर्निंग ऑल्सो. ओके माय स्टूडेंट. So there are also field observation also have the advantages. More reliable method which we go in that the area that efficiency observation, the study minor details in incidents that are occurring. We are getting knowledge with the minor, not everything, but it will helps to get more of the efficiency and observe, and which we get effect and which create in your life an incident which helps to occurs to develop your own thoughts. There are many limitations also. These methods can only be used for the incident which are pertaining to that period of time. It means the field observation also helps to pertaining for the period of time in the form of incident, when it form of the creating the problems in the form of जैसे कि टाइम हमारे पास नहीं रहता, तब हम पूरी जानकारी नहीं ले पाते, तो इट इज़ अ शॉर्टेज ऑफ टाइम. ओके माय डियर स्टूडेंट. Participating Participatory observation. In this participatory observations, when certain matters about the group and the peoples have been gathered, in which the all the group of the members have become to learn something, in this opportunity in which the peoples have to minutely make them to make a target of information and this purpose to solve it. But in this most important advantage of the method in which the observation himself and the members of group can take the members into the confidence, and this was participatory observation had been mingled to create a big group. जैसे कि आप अपना व्यूज देते हो, आप मीटिंग में हो और दूसरे लोग आपके आपके अच्छे थॉट्स को वाह वाह कहते ज्वाइंट होते हैं, दैट मीन्स दैट इज कॉल्ड पार्टिसिपेटरी ऑब्जर्वेशन. If somebody wants to unearth the deceitful action of the sadhu tent, then on the must can become the ascetic disciple and procure incident information. Means some of the observation have become a part of human terrifying the group in if he wishes to obtain information about the same, and they can achieve most. So there are also advantages of it and the form of the field observation, and what you have like अनऑब्टेनेबल इंफॉर्मेशन, जैसे कि आपके पास वो जो जानकारी नहीं थी लेकिन आपको मेथडोलॉजी हो गई, आपको वो सारी जानकारी मिली, उसमें एक लिमिटेशंस भी होता है. मीन्स अ ग्रुप members comes to know that the observation attention that it will become impossible for him to complete the task. उसको पता है कि वो नहीं कर पाएगा, लेकिन फिर भी ये ग्रुप ऑब्जर्वेशन में वो सारी चीज़ें डिस्क्राइब होगी, लेकिन द सम ऑफ द लिमिटेशन बाउंड्री वी कैन कम टू नो द वीकनेस ऑफ द people. Okay. Comparative observation method in which we used to one want to study the behavior of two the people and two group or the compare them, especially when the two groups are observed and compared, then observer is able to draw the certain conclusion. For example, the technology knowledge of the modern minor boy and old person. If we want to compare with the modern people to the olden child and both the education, if we do for the comparison study, the minor people have been got much more marks as compared to the modern people. So It means that how you analyze and to compare the form of the percentage in this comparative study of the education and the health facility and the growth of GDP, and this comparative we can do with the help of logically comparing with the form of percentage or in the number or with the names and many other things with the country also. It has advantages like more reliable, especially we can come to know the study the similarities. In the same way, in the form of limitation, and we also obtain and adopt the comparative approach. In this uh, limitations, we come to know that comparison also create the mindset and also have the effect of the adoption of the comparative method that creates the इंफॉर्मेशन विच कैनॉट बी ऑप्टेन, जैसे कि अब तक नहीं था लेकिन वो चीज़ें बाहर आती है. अंडरस्टैंड. Longitudinal cross sectional case history method. In this method, longitude and cross section methods are specifically used to study the developmental stage of longitude cross-section method. In this case of history methods, you will understand the longitude method in which the long period of time. It is the development psychology undertakes in which the people started thinking for the developing change in the form of children to increase its age. It's going on the changes from the every stage of life, and you verified an effectiveness in immunity vaccines and the longer period, and it is the individual health and ideal method. So in the longitudinal studies, you study the stage of life, and when people study of the childhood, the teenage, the adolescence, and adulthood, and the 6 months, and every group of the spectralisms in the same with the present finding about the comparing the previous ones and the present ones, and this helps to decision taken and how you start and grasping yourself into the long term method. So there is also an advantages in this longitudinal study. It is the type of subject matter which is a process for the long term, and it is also considered as evaluating from the past at the present, and we can found to the age of error. In the same with the limitations with the type of study, we also have the less people's cooperate they find at the tiring. Longitudinal method throws expensive form of the time, energy, and we are not having truly time experience point of view. The reliability can be at a risk when the study is based on the small population. Means longitudinal method which is not applicable for everyone, but it cannot come to the conclusion for a long time. It is very weak. It cannot conclude with the logical meaning. It is very long, and it is very much tough to evaluate within the one point. Okay. Cross-section method, in which cross-section method which helps to the way we can cross verify and stage quickly, we can take some action with the form of time, and you consider the study together. Okay, like any kind of childhood who had passed through all the stages, and one cannot reach it. Okay, एक बच्चा पास हो रहा है, दूसरा नहीं, क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? तो क्रॉस सेक्शन मेथड विच हेल्प्स यू टू evaluate the way the what is the weakness in that particular student. Okay, in which the students is having the problems. In this also having the advantage of the comparing the longitude method and helps to saving time. हमारा टाइम बचता है, एक्सपीरियंस होता है, हम लॉजिकली इवेल्युएट कर पाते हैं. इसमें एक नेगेटिविटी क्या है लिमिटेशन में, जैसे कि वन नेवर स्टडी द सेम पर्सन गोइंग थ्रू, तो हम दूसरे बारे में ही बात करेंगे. एक बार रिपीटेशन नहीं होगा, रिवीजन नहीं होगा, इवेल्युएशन एक बार कर लिया तो कुछ चेंजेस होगा तो नहीं कर पाएंगे. ओके, सो it is very much tough to evaluate the same result. Why? Because it is unchanged. Because in the cross-section method we go on the process of way of systematic study. Okay, case history method, in which case history which was past and which necessary to arise then in the form of the logically in the numbers and past as well as present, and that related to the comparison the different we study in the logical manner. and that prepare to presently occurs in the life, and no kind of manipulating is done in the research in this method. इसमें कोई research नहीं होता है. In this case study, it is also logical. It gives the perfect meaning, perfect information. It also has the limitations like a natural and the form of history method that derives the information only descriptive in the nature. जैसे वो descriptive होता है, like, but it analyze the difficult problems. It creates the problems with the past problems which have the problems with the countries, but somehow it been described in the form of history, in the form of case study, which has all the data. Okay, experimental method, which helps to very much good method, experimental method which create the psychology, the logical science. Without the experimental method, we cannot consider the psychology as a science because it is very much important. So, experiment is observation carried out in the control situation. अगर आपके पास एक्सपेरिमेंट नहीं कर पाते तो आप कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाते, यानी कि आपकी स्ट्रेटेजी बनाना बहुत ज़रूरी है. एनी काइंड ऑफ साइकोलॉजी, अगर आप ऑब्जर्वेशन सही से नहीं कर सकते यानी कि आप इवेल्यूट भी नहीं कर पाएंगे. एक्सपेरिमेंट हेल्प अस टू मेक you to do the result, and then only you go for the result oriented work, and it will come to in the form of output. Characteristics of an experiment. There are the experiments are control, manipulating, and repetition. See, if you do any kind of experiment, if you are not having your own control, that means experiment will be flourished. So every procedure has its own control to solve the problems. So, for example, if there is a child who is walking when he or she might be sleeping and the way of the walking but unable to know the problem, okay, but many times the parents are start wanted to control anyhow to stop the child to walk, otherwise sometimes it creates the problems while hurting it to the body, any parts, okay. So there should be the control over the peoples, whether there is a conscious or unconscious. There should be some experimental study to control that kind of the thing which should happen in that child. Okay, manipulating and the changing in the experimenting, that remains the same, because study would not be possible if we cannot do change. So changing is equally important for the as per the era. We need to change in the form of the change. It creates the very much effectively in the form of good risk. So change is equally important for the study of an experiment. Understand? Repetitions in this experiment which helps to do the perfect ways of change, and we do the repetition in the form of experiment. Why? Because the comparison method and the way we are not doing the repetition, but in the form of repetition method we do the change and possible through the repetition process. So we can find out the error, we can solve the problems. If we are not doing the repetition in the experiment, we are not finding the exit and the actual result. Objectivity in these experimental characteristics of experiment we will study. If you are having the objective, the result, and result are not oriented and you are not focusing it, and this objectivity not come in the form of output. So output is very much important to understand the objectivity, the way, what is the logic, what are the outcomes of the experiment. There are the many variables things in the experiment and the variable significance, and the experimental process had become to the many administrative way. But the variable differences in the form of the procedure had been planned and experimental, but in the form of process the experimental had been performed, and these administrative practices had been done in the form of variable practices. So independent variable, like there are independent and dependent variable. In this independent variables, it means that any kind of the effect which had been examined, the modified the experiment, and it is called the independent variable. So any stimuli or the changes had been come, and that should be measured in the form of variable. So there should be the present and absent independent variable by changing the intensity of the independent variable. Okay, my dear student. For example, to study the effect of alcohol in the memory, and it is not easy, but it is the form of influence of the variable alcohol and been examined in the two way. Understand, my dear student? Now we are coming to dependent variable. Dependent variable is
very much influential, but it is not at all variable in which the dependent independent variable. That's why it is not a dependent variable. Like result of an experiment, like some of the experiments we cannot do without any kind of dependent variable. Okay, it is very much important to have influence of alcohol equally important for the person, but it is dependent. Without that they cannot do the thing. Okay, which is equally important because the habitual habit. Control relevant variables, it is equally understand that people used to have the control variable, no matter they have been the habitual things which in their life, but they need to have control. If they saw the different perspective in the study and carried out any higher orders, and they get the better understanding, and they understand the form of evaluating how to resolve and how to overcome the problems, and that can be solved by doing the controlling in the form of it. So example of an experiment, there are the many example of experiment which is given. I have shared. So some of the examples of the child IQ level has been become determined and the 6 month continuously, and child is given the determined, and then it's the one IQ again is measured, and then IQ is measured in increasing. See, I can assume that the thiamine has positively influenced in the childhood IQ. Okay, so it's the experimental is it the process in which the people's IQ has been goes on change, and it is measured in the form of experimental in the form of this is evaluated in the form of characteristics with the help of child IQ level has been gone extend as was what was the past, and it was quite changed in the present. So there are also